Space, the final frontier, where stars are born and galaxies collide in a cosmic dance of unimaginable proportions. Our home, the Milky Way, is just one among billions of galaxies, each containing billions of stars, and perhaps even more planets. Sorry about that, I can't keep that accent up for too long. My body tries to kill me if I commit cringe for extended periods of time. I know shockingly little about space, and chances are you do as well, because even the smartest people in all of our planet's history only know a little bit more than nothing about space, and about its intricate details and what's out there. I even used ChatGPT to generate that introduction bit sounding like Kurzgesagt for this script, because if I tried to speak facts about space, I would get fact-checked harder than people complaining about video games being woke.
What? Fucking pronouns!
However, I have noticed a trend in the video game industry as it relates specifically to space open-world exploration games that I wanted to talk about and present in this video. This phenomenon is what I would like to call massive space games are very often boring and very underwhelming. Now, I know just saying that I have already made a few enemies. After all, I'm trying to criticize an entire game genre for having one single problem, when in reality it's much more nuanced than that. But the games that I specifically wanted to talk about are the ones with this pitch that I am sure you have heard a billion times in the past few years. In our video game, Wormhole's Hole in Hole, you can do anything and go anywhere you want. There are so many planets I can't even keep track of. You make the discoveries of what is out there for the first time. Do anything, be a true space explorer, fulfill your wildest dreams in our open world universe. I feel like I've heard that pitch so much in the past few years with the trend of open world exploration games that I feel like I'm going to get a space ulcer. Ultimately, I think when talking about what are the most important factors when making a space game is keeping a reasonable sense of scale by having a clear vision of what kind of game you want to make. What I mean by this is despite how hard it may be to acknowledge your own limitations, video games cannot be infinitely large, and I believe that when you try to produce a game with infinite boundaries with limitless possibilities, you miss out on making your game the best it can be. As we've already learned from my shoddy educational intro, I know jack all about space, but I do know one thing, it is really fucking big. Because of this, many developers have taken it upon themselves to create worlds that can accomplish this size through illusions that a vast majority of players won't even come close to exploring. However, in order to make the most amount of content possible with the minimum amount of budget being spent, the answer that most developers give to the answer of all this content demand is by procedurally generating all of the content that the player will run into on said planet. The largest problem with this is procedurally generated content is not a complete foundation that any game should be built off of, because, breaking news, some level of development by people needs to be done to manually set conditions for parts of a game in order to be fun and function properly. I find that the games that use procedurally generated content the best are the ones that create a primary experience that they want to create first, and then use procedural generation as a tool to enhance the work and strong foundation that they have already put into their game. We then return to my original point. Games should be built with a clear vision in mind and by making sure that your sense of scale makes sense for what you're going to be making, because by making your sense of scale too large, you run into this. Don't worry, we're going to be at that planet any second now. Yep. We are getting closer. We're almost there. Not only is it a pain in the ass to get anywhere on your massive map, but every planet is procedurally generated with the slightest inconsequential differences. Like, oh look, that fern is blue instead of green. Man, I'm glad I spent the last 30 minutes flying my ship here from the last identical planet. All of this is all the more important as we move into the age of artificial intelligence, where making low-effort cash grabs will be all the easier as technology improves and is put into the hands of more and more people. But when making a game, your sense of scale should be manageable and planned out from the start, which gets you a game like The Outer Wilds, where there is only one solar system to explore, but all of the content is handcrafted and purposeful, and everyone adores this game. It is one of the most recommended games of the past few years. But I would like to delve into more examples to further demonstrate my point of how space games can vary in quality based on the implementation of scale. Primarily, I would like to discuss 4 games in particular, each one having a varying level of success among consumers in their quality, but I think each one has an important lesson to teach us. No Man's Sky is my founding father of video games that make me depressed. When I was excited for No Man's Sky, I had just delved into the world of video games by buying a PlayStation 4 in 2015, just a year before the game had been scheduled to come out. Boy, let me tell you, the hype I felt for this game could possibly be the most hyped I have ever been for a video game in my entire life. I would scour YouTube looking for videos of footage for this game, any interviews, demos, literally anything I could set my eyes on that I would watch over and over again. I would tell classmates at school about the game. Anyone in earshot, I would give a giant ad for the game and how it was going to change the gaming industry forever. And at the center of it all was Sean Murray, the leader of Hello Games and the face of the game's development. The pitch for No Man's Sky was so large that I can barely even properly explain it. There were a near infinite amount of planets. Creatures were automatically generated so you would discover brand new animals on each planet. Every planet had its own biomes and mysteries. You could share your discoveries with others. You can go anywhere you can look. And it was said that it will take you more time to beat the game than the heat death of our sun in our real universe. With claims like that, how could any kid not be excited? As a boy who was obsessed with Star Wars like nothing else, I was obsessed and ensured that this game would be treasured to me for my whole life. And then the game actually came out, and boy, disappointed was not a deep enough word to describe my feelings on the week of launch. At first, I was huffing that copium so hard I'm surprised my lungs didn't give out. This game isn't that bad, right? I mean, there are many planets, surely they aren't all the same, right? I was really pissed, and more than anything, just depressed. However, with No Man's Sky, there is a silver lining in all of this. The developers of the game actually gave a damn about satisfying customers and making a good product at the end of the day. Murray and the people at Hello Games have been cooking a 5-star meal in the kitchen since 2016, clearly putting in a lot of love and effort into the game by making update after update for this game, and all for free. No Man's Sky is almost unrecognizable from how it was before, and the community is all the better for it. I hear almost endless praise these days from all the additions that the game has added, like base building, mounts, and multiplayer, just to list some of these updates. Thankfully, there is a happy ending for Hello Games and No Man's Sky, but I can't help but be at least a little annoyed still at the original state that the game was released in, and also with a new game that Murray teased at the Game Awards last year, Light No Fire. Please don't lead me astray again, Sean.
Am I moving? Heck yeah!
For an example that kicks ass in the space game genre, Outer Wilds is a game that makes me look at all the flops in the same genre and judge them all the more harshly because of what the team for this game were able to accomplish. I must admit, however, that while I am about to praise this game for all the things that it does right, I've only put a few hours into this game as of writing this video and haven't completed the story. From what I did play, however, I was incredibly impressed at the solar system that the developers were able to create and how fun it is flying around like a real space explorer, even with the element that I'm less than thrilled about, time loops. So, if I say anything in this portion that is incorrect, it is because I'm finding what I can from research rather than an in-depth playthrough, so I apologize. For starters, all of the content in Outer Wilds is handcrafted, which means that all of the elements that are present within the game are purposeful inclusions that make the world more interesting to explore as a whole. In Outer Wilds, you play as an unnamed space explorer as part of an alien race, and with the main character having a lack of personality, it allows you to slip into their shoes and become the space explorer yourself. Therefore, you are free to explore this solar system however you would like on your own spaceship, and with the built-in mechanics of time loops, you can explore without fear of death or getting lost, because you will always be able to return back to the point where you began. While I am not especially fond of time loops as a mechanic because sometimes it can feel like I am retreading familiar ground too often, I find its implementation in Outer Wilds to be tasteful and a helpful mechanic to help the player feel comfortable exploring freely without fear. So here we have an indie game that spits on the launch state of No Man's Sky with its sheer quality, and it is games like Outer Wilds that show that space games have unlimited possibilities if given a clear vision and expectations that are set with the player.
Fucking pronouns! Fucking gender ambiguity! Fucking current day Californian shit!
Starfield is one of those games that makes me do the noise that is all too common in the modern video game industry. Man. What I mean by this is Starfield is a definition of a missed opportunity, not just as a space game, but as a Bethesda game in general. Bethesda is a game studio with one of the best reputations in video game history, like a decade ago. You have undoubtedly heard of Bethesda from franchises like Fallout and Elder Scrolls, which are games that have defined the term RPG in video games for decades. These games not only innovated in gameplay, but also in story, character writing, and world building. Old school Bethesda was such a powerhouse that every gamer had to collectively stop what they were doing when a new game from them came out because you knew it would be one of the best experiences in gaming. Go anywhere, do anything has been their unofficial motto for decades, as each of their games has allowed for what seems like limitless possibilities in their worlds, from builds in their games to side quests to uncover. So if I were to go back in time 10 years ago and tell their fans back then that in 9 years' time you will be getting a space game made by Bethesda, they would have literally been tempted to cryo-freeze themselves so that they could be perfectly preserved for when this next game comes out. But oh no, they would be mistaken. We would all be mistaken. In the months leading up to Starfield's launch, people had absolutely no clue what to expect from this game, as all we had gotten up to that point was a cinematic trailer and a release date. However, this problem would eventually get to be solved on June 11th, 2023, where Bethesda had a 45-minute deep dive into Starfield and its mechanics. This presentation was incredible and won over many people across the internet that were skeptical after the absolutely disastrous title Fallout 76 that released just a few years prior. This also made them hype for the game that was coming out in just a few months. The main pitch for this game was the idea that this is a deep Bethesda RPG, but with the vastness that comes with a space exploration game, with procedurally generated content on over 1,000 planets, with interesting content that will be generated throughout. Ideally, this game sounds like one of the deepest and most engrossing games ever made. However, in practice, it felt a lot like how No Man's Sky felt like at launch. Don't get me wrong, Starfield has had much more story and quests at launch than No Man's Sky had in its launch, but both were bloated with such mediocre space exploration that it became a detriment to its gaming experience. In Starfield, the feeling of landing on planets is completely deflating because you have to go through like 20 fucking cutscenes just to land on the planet and begin walking around. And when you do walk around, there's almost nothing around on these empty planets except for the occasional procedurally generated enemy base. The space exploration of Starfield is borderline pathetic and is a joke when you compare it to the state of exploration that No Man's Sky has currently, especially with the game feeling like it is at odds with the player at all times when trying to feel immersed. Add the fact that the world feels so sterile when compared to other sci-fi worlds, and you have a game that I'm not exactly jumping for joy when considering exploring. Despite just laying on some pretty heavy criticism on the game, I still have some slight level of interest to return to Starfield one day and continue my save file just because the Bethesda game formula is a sort of comfort food for me. So, while the game remains an open book for me eventually coming back to it one day, one thing is definitely for sure, Starfield has a clunky and unfocused vision when it comes to space exploration that is cause for the breaking of the camel's back for excitement for all future Bethesda games. Much like on Outer Wilds, I feel like when I talk about EVE Online, I come from a perspective of inexperience, as I technically have tried it once in middle school, played the tutorial, couldn't take off, and raged and quit the game. And whenever I look into the game after years of not tracking it at all, it looks like looking in at 60-year-olds playing the oldest version of Warhammer, but one game takes thousands of hours. And if that wasn't intimidating enough, you have legends like this on YouTube compiling EVE lore into YouTube videos that are so long that it makes my content creator brain melt. But from what I can say about EVE, it is one of those few games that I have found that has one of the largest scales in gaming and is actually a pretty fun game for its player base. What separates this game from other space games, though, is that this one is an MMO and is heavily focused on community with other players to enhance what would otherwise be a fairly dull experience. You are able to join guilds, communicate with other players, and fight in massive real-time wars with real-life money. Like, holy shit, how can this kind of money be lost on digital ships? This is absolute madness. But yes, I wanted to bring up EVE as an example here of a game that is able to back up its absolute monstrous size with a community that is able to make its own enjoyment through player interaction. So it acts as an edge case for other space games, as the goal is not exploration, but is making your legacy amongst the stars, which can be just as badass. So, as a final point from all of these examples, if you're out there looking to create your own space game or any open world game in general, make sure that you have a scale and ideas that are compatible with it, because when it comes to making art, delivering a balanced experience that you want to share with the world is the most important thing. So stay curious and keep exploring, friends. Thanks again everyone for watching this video and coming back to my channel, or if you're new then thank you for giving this humble YouTuber a shot on this platform with almost endless content. It means the world. Thanks everyone, and I hope you have a great one. Peace.